I'm a member of the Litfest board, and it's great to see so many folks here to see the next chapter of poetry as part of this year's program. These poets behind me will be reading in a minute. Their poetry was selected to be read today from a program at the high school. And afterwards, if you want to linger, if you didn't catch everything that you heard from the poets, their poetry is posted there and there. There is in town also, as you may know, storefront poetry, and some of the student poetry is in windows downtown. And some of those also are over on that bulletin board with a program showing what stores are featuring what poetry. So linger afterwards if you'd like and reread or read what you're going to be hearing in a few minutes. And before they read, however, the question is, how did they get here? Where does this come from? Well, it comes from two of the school's best teachers standing to my left here, who created a program called Arts in Action, and they're going to explain it. I might say also, this is a program all day long, as you know, about books and publishing and so on. And Dennis and Kristen have their own book about to be published called AI and the Writing Workshop. And in that book, there's a whole chapter which describes what these folks have been going through. That's going to come out in about 5 weeks, so you can rush down to the bookstore and pick up a copy by these two authors right here. And they're going to explain briefly how this all came about, why these poems have been written, and how they got written through a program that they developed.
All right, thank you, Chad. I just want to express how excited I am to see this room full. And if any of you are here right now with misgivings because there's a game or a place you were supposed to be, otherwise, I promise you, I've never left a gathering of poets disappointed. So I think you're in for a good time. The Arts in Action program came out of COVID. Just to kind of go back to its beginning, we had an opportunity to link up with Racial Unity Team, who operates their home base is out of Exeter, but they operate throughout the state. And they brought in some mentors to work with our students in that year. And the idea was that we would lead off our students with poetry, that poetry would speak to our core text, which at the time was To Kill a Mockingbird. We've experimented with other books, but have come back to Mockingbird, so the poetry is commenting on the themes in Mockingbird. And then from that point, which is where we are when we come back to school on Monday, we ask the question at the end of Mockingbird, what change in the world do you want to see? Which leads them into their final research papers. So that whole unit is the Arts in Action unit. And what we're about to see today is actually the beginning of that unit, the poetry unit. I think I'll hand it off to Christina. She's going to finish that description up and invite our first poet up.
I'm Christina Peterson. I teach alongside Dennis at Exeter High School. And in terms of the poetry unit, we've been doing this kind of unit maybe for a decade now, trying to get real life slam and spoken word poetry into the lives of our students and asking them to share their stories with us. And so in our classes, we will watch a whole bunch of poetry, and students will write poetry, and then they will get up in front of their classmates and perform the poetry. We take 2 of the strongest from each class, and we invite them to perform at Slam 3 and Fly, which is our open mic poetry celebration that we do right before February break. And so what you'll see here today are some of the strongest from that competition as well. So I'm really excited to invite our first poet up. Eliza is a freshman in my period 1 class, and her poem has this incredible extended metaphor that I was so impressed with. And she's titled this poem Compliment Flowers. So please help me invite Alexa Holland up to the stage.
For some reason, teenage girls plant each other in hugs and shower each other in compliments. You're so pretty, you're so smart, you're so sweet. The vines, they start at your toes, and they make their way up to your ears. Flowers bloom on your shoulders and on your stomach. But if compliments are supposed to make you feel like you're growing, then why do I feel like I'm being strangled each time I receive one? Maybe because, like the pine tree in my backyard, the vines are tightening around my neck. Never mind the roses. Thorns pierce my skin, leaving scars I can see when I look in the mirror and my eyelashes aren't curling the right way. And the thing about compliment flowers is that they wilt when no one pays attention to them. You can see everyone else's just fine, while your own slowly decay, leaving you desperate for any half-grown, half-meant, half-hearted seed of a compliment to try and grow just one more flower. My friends and I don't really compliment each other all that much, or hug all that often. And I think that's because I'm a tree instead of a vine covered in pink blooms. I'm a tree. My roots extend past the confines of this concrete greenhouse. My roots tie me down to what I know is real, that empathy and kindness are more important than the jewelry that is wreathed around my neck. My roots are buried deep in the beliefs my family has planted in me, that high school isn't everything, and anyone who makes you feel less than yourself is not worth your time. It's when I realize this that I feel bad for the vines, covering themselves in pink blooms, just trying to be noticed. Maybe if they were trees too, they wouldn't feel the need to grow the flowers that prove they're so pretty, they're so smart, and they're so sweet. Thank you.
Okay, when I was describing the poetry unit earlier and talking about one of its purposes is to connect directly to the themes of our book, there are other reasons we love to bring poetry in. It helps our students explore their voices in ways that other forms of writing just don't achieve. And another reason that we like to have poetry in our classroom as a unit is because it uncovers hidden gems that we didn't know were there, or were just kind of perhaps haven't found their voice yet. And I remember realizing when this particular student came up with her poem and was ready to put it in front of the class that it had uncovered this particular hidden gem. So please welcome Molly Kennedy with Breaking the Quiet.
I woke up to the loud sound of my alarm clock beeping. The bright, unsettling neon numbers lit up the shadows of my room with a radioactive green glow. The continuous noise pierces my brain as I reach a hand to my side and feel for the snooze button. Then everything is dark once again. 5:45 a.m. The beeping begins for a second time before it's cut abruptly short. This time I force myself to get up. My whole body feels shaky. The floor feels frozen to touch. The house feels silent, almost peaceful. The thoughts float over my head 1,000 times over. Everything feels as if I'm in a haze. I blink sleep from my eye. Cold running water splashes my face and trickles down my shirt as I lean over the bathroom sink. 6:05 a.m. My house is quiet, yet my head is loud. I've learned to ignore it, but I can't dismiss the overwhelming feeling of how heavy my head feels. Millions of thoughts enter in and out, but it's impossible to grasp onto one. Like a hand outstretched aiming for handfuls of sand, tiny grains. Many thoughts intertwine with its fingers and fall. And as the hand tries to salvage as many as it can, more small pieces of remembrance continue to escape into nothingness, never to be seen again. 6:30 a.m. I can hear the creaking of her wooden stairs as my mom shuffles down them, and the small opening and closing of cabinet doors that can be heard outside my cracked door. So quiet my house stays, despite the little reminders that life inhabits it. My cat pushes away in the stair for good mornings. Her tail switches from side to side. Everything feels the same as it always is. This day is no different from all the other days I've had to get up. I go to the same place every day and do pretty much the same thing, yet my anxiety bubbles in my throat like poison, and I force myself to swallow. 6:55 a.m. I finish getting ready and begin to pack my bag to leave. Sunlight attempts to peek through my heavy curtains. I go over everything I need in my head, over and over again, even though I always find myself forgetting something. I stare at the green, enduring numbers on my clock. The cold wind floor sends shivers through my body. I'm calculating how many more seconds I can stand in my room before I eventually have to go downstairs, calculating the hours in which I'll return to the spot once again. 7:05 a.m. I hop on the passenger side door. The 10-minute drive feels like 30. The small murmurs of talk radio is the one thing I force myself to concentrate on, as well as the little conversations between my mom and I, which are left feeling airy and dry because we're both too tired to talk. And as the car trudges through the snowy roads, small snowflakes land on the windshield, but they quickly melt from the impact of the inside heat. My anxiety builds as we approach the school. It's something I'm so used to, something I've always felt. And as I close the car door with a thud and begin to walk up the large pathway to the main entrance, I understand how easy it is to break the quiet.
Wow, that was incredible. Thank you. One of the poets that we study freshman year is a poet named Sarah Kay, and she has a really famous TED Talk about poetry, and her poem, Point B, or If I Should Have a Daughter, is what inspired our next poet. Although, in all honesty, I'm fairly certain that Cohen Dixon came to us a full-fledged poet already. But his poem, Dear Dorian, is a letter to his future son. So please join me in welcoming Cohen.
Dear Dorian, even though I haven't found your mother yet, I'm still waiting for you to arrive. You are what makes water move down streams. You may realize that sometimes in life you are exactly like me, and that may scare you. I don't know if that might be for the good or the bad, but I do know that your first heartbreak will suck. He or she will tear you apart into 1 billion tiny little confetti sheets, but I will build you back together into the party you once were. Number 1, never put yourself before friends and family. I want you to remember that no matter where I am, I will always put you before them. I want you to look at the world through a colorful rainbow kaleidoscope, because all I see when I look in those eyes are shapes that are congruent to mine. All I see is what I do or did. All I see is my failure. Number 2, treat others the way you want to be treated. The only thing golden here is the gold I steal. I never want to rob you of the same mistakes I made, because my failure always leads to sadness. I want your failure to lead to success. The only gold I've ever held is the kind that disappears. I never want you to inherit my losses. Number 3, breathe. Just breathe. Be there and breathe. Take in this beautiful world while you still can, because I once was like you. Wide-eyed, fearless. But the world will test you, and what you choose to become matters. But if you choose to become the same mistake I did, well then, we will run into a problem. If you decide to be misogynistic or homophobic or racist or sexist, if you decide to treat women with no respect or treat your mom with no respect, if you forget to love who is loving you, then we will have a problem. And that problem, it's me. Like father, like son. Do I make myself clear?
I think that poem gets more powerful each time I hear it. Excellent job. Earlier, Dennis was talking about how poetry uncovers hidden gems. While this student is now a junior, her freshman year, she was one of those hidden gems. And each time she writes a new poem, I feel like I'm just blown away all over again. Out of the 15 or so poems that she has in her current collection, junior Lily Bozinski is going to be performing a love poem. Please join me in welcoming her.
I have never written a love poem. I have written poems about love, about how much I love my family, about how much I love my friends, about how much I love the world, about the times that I love myself, and the times that I don't. But I have never written a love poem. I'm not opposed to trying new things. I'll give it a go. Let me write you a love poem about the first and only, romantic relationship I have ever been in. It was a kindergarten crush. Nothing more, really. It lasted only a few days. I was 13 and stupid. That's what I tell myself, what I try to believe, because it makes the daggers in my back sting a little less. Let me be honest for a moment. It wasn't a few days. It was 10 years. 10 wonderfully sickening years. We met in preschool. I don't really know how we met, but obviously we did because we were instantly best friends. Or at least, best friends on the days you wanted to be. Those were the best days. The days when the sun was a big yellow circle in the sky. On the days when someone else was your best friend instead, I wandered the playground alone, befriending my shadow, a gray mass of shapes I didn't know the name of. We weren't classmates for several years in elementary school, but you still managed to be the center of my solar system. I never held on to any friendships, except for you. Once I waved to my neighbor in the hallway. You saw and you refused to speak to me for the whole day. I thought you hated me. I begged you to tell me why you wouldn't talk. When you finally did, you said you were testing me, and that you concluded I was gullible. In middle school, you weren't in any of my classes once again. But that didn't matter. You were still the X in my equation, the single most important variable that I was always solving for. After COVID, I hadn't even noticed you were one of my only friends. The few left were the ones you approved of. You were the most important person in my whole world. You said jump, and I already knew how high. So when you said you loved me, I gave you my heart. Can you still hear it beating beneath your floorboards? It took me an eternity to finally see my blood had been spilt. I was blinded by how delicious your poison was. I drank it up like honey, ignorant to its toxins spreading through my veins, unaware of the fact that you were the only antidote, oblivious to how it would nearly kill me the moment I finally tore away from your hold. But there was light on the other side. Not the light of the afterlife, but the light at the end of the tunnel. The light of finally being able to see clearly. The light of knowing I've broken free. Yet, even now, in the light, I will never love another like I loved you. I will love my family. I will love my friends. I will love the world. I will love myself. And someday I will love a partner worthy of a love poem. But I will never love anyone the same way I loved you. My love for you was all-encompassing and obsessive and twisted and full of rot. My love for you was a 12-hour shift without pay. My love for you was a child's toy in the jaws of a grizzly bear. My love for you was the strings that wrap around a marionette's limbs and force it to dance. But God, did I love you. I loved you like a hostage with Stockholm Syndrome. I loved you like the protagonist of a dark romance. I loved you like Eve loved the snake. Even then, for as much as I loved you, I love this light more. Thank you.
Okay, so I had the pleasure of describing the cleaner version of how the Arts and Action unit works and how the poetry unit works, but you should know that there are always outliers who will go through the process with us, but maybe the process doesn't get them to their final poem. And these next two poets who are coming up were struggling with that until like the day before or so that things were due. And you know, you can have a student who has chosen a topic but isn't really married to it, and as they go along, they just kind of like, they go through the process, but maybe doesn't get them to where they want it to go. And then you can have a poet who only needs 24 hours because they're super invested in the topic, and I knew that these two guys were going to go that direction when I saw the energy that they had for this particular topic. So please welcome Xavier and Gabe to recite Who We Are.
American.
Straight out of the Northeast.
America's whitest area.
That's how we see ourselves.
White. My last name is Bueno.
Garcia de Paredes.
Yeah, asked me to speak Spanish and I'm frozen.
Like a deer in headlights.
Getting outclassed by my own French teacher.
I don't see the photos of myself, usually a darker shade of group.
Black.
Tan.
It reminds me of who I truly am.
Where I truly come from.
It reminds me of who I'm supposed to be.
The next Swan Soda.
The next Lionel Messi.
Not a wrestler.
And not a runner.
If you ask me a cultural holiday of mine is, I blank.
If you ask me the name of Dominican food, I blank.
So is the only thing that identifies me?
My appearance.
The color bonded to my skin, but only in the summer.
The color bond to my skin permanently.
The color that makes me ever so slightly unique.
The color that separates me from the rest.
The color that's too white for my family.
The color that's too black for everyone else. So now we're stuck.
What am I?
Does my heritage matter here?
Am I really different?
I feel white.
But white feels wrong.
What do we do? What are we?
All right, this next poet is the exact opposite of that. In that, when I rolled over to her desk at the beginning of the unit, I remember asking, so what are you writing about? And, where are you headed? What can I do to help you? I've already got it written and it's 3/4 memorized. And I was like, this is going to be a good poem. I hadn't even seen it yet, but I knew that that energy was there. So please welcome Ryan Wilson up here to read us Box of Love.
I'm done trying to fit in your box labeled what a girl is. With suffocating rules that tell me I'm stupid no matter what. This style where makeup is both mandatory and desperate, where food means strength in you but repulsive in me. From every corner I construct a misogyny that scare a woman from ever escaping. And in this box I mustn't have too many opinions, and instead I must sit in a corner. Don't slouch, smile more, no complaining. Don't think too hard because you'll realize how sickening this really is. Just calm down. Calm down, calm down, calm down, calm down. I can't breathe in this dress that is too tight and too short. The tag size girl. Because every girl is expected to fit this dress. And I realize this may be the reason I gagged at the word dress in 3rd grade. Why I made every effort to make sure people knew I hated pink. You run like a girl, you walk like a girl, you throw like a girl, you say it like it is a slur. The greatest of all insults when we were kids, yet I don't think we'll ever grow out of it. And what do you think this does to little girls around the world? To be told that their gender is embarrassing and pitiful? And then when we grow up and get mad because we finally look sexy in the face, you tell us to calm down. Calm down, calm down, calm down. No. I will never calm down. Because in your eyes, a girl is weak, a girl is stupid, and I am so dramatic to be standing here, reciting this poem that exposes every part of me that I was taught to hide. You cannot stand to see someone testing your made-up rules because you know how transparent they really are. And if these words bother you, if my presence is intimidating, I hope you realize that I am not the problem. It is just your toxic masculinity. I hope you realize that this poem is not hate. It is me standing up so maybe other young women can feel strong too. So here I am. And even though my body trembles and my voice shakes, I'm holding the hands of my sisters. And I'm telling them that they never need to calm down. They need to get mad, and fight for each other. Because all we need is each other to change the world. And with this unstoppable front, I am breaking out of your box. Your box that you use to silence the beating hearts of injustice with your soundproof walls. Your box that you use to poke your ears at our screams so you never have to question what you know deep down is wrong. Your box that you use to shield your eyes at our scars from every time no one believed us. They say silence can be the greatest evil. So is years of dehumanizing people just because some idiot decided that they weren't good enough. Your box was never my home, or who I am. Watch me tear down the walls, who knew they were so thin. And I'm making my own world, because a girl is so much more than your box.
Okay, so if you have been teaching poetry unit as long as Mrs. Peterson and I have, you start looking for poems early on and poets early on too. You want to kind of collect them. We've become collectors of poets, I think. And at a poetry team meeting early in the year, mid-range year, this particular poet shared this poem with the group, and I thought, ooh, I know where that poem's going. So with that said, oh, by the way, I wanted to mention poetry team. So out of this whole poetry unit, over the years, students have gathered together and created essentially a poetry team where they meet in my room on Friday mornings and talk poetry, organize for all things poetry. We have another event such as like this coming up at the end of the year. If you've been to a poetry team meeting and you're in the group, will you raise your hand? Thank you. Also, I would be remiss without mentioning that Shayla and B, who are going to close things up for us, kept the lights on a poetry team for a number of years before we started getting our numbers back again, so shout out to you two as well. So, our poetry team member coming up to recite Pop Quiz is Lucy Bailey.
Unit review. If a regular polygon has 7 sides, what's the sum of a singular interior angle? How fast can you lock a door when your classroom is brittling over like an anxious pot? What is the difference between a parallelogram and a trapezoid? To what decibel can you quiet your trembling breath? Tell me again what an 11-sided figure is called, but also, do you know how to make your body small enough to fit under a desk? Pop quiz. Question 1 for 25 points. What do you do when the world outside is about to explode? Being a ritual keeps us safe. Phone in your bag, in the caddy, turned off. The silence you're met with is palpable. Groups of kids huddled into corners, if not huddled running, if not running walking, if not walking crawling, and if not crawling simply trying to hold on to the wispy silky strands of life that they have left that is sifting through their hands like sand. But tell me, who do you reach for when the door handle jostles? It is not a student coming back from the bathroom. Who do you reach for as you listen to your classmate take their last breath wrapped in silence thicker than smoke? Certainly not your phone. That's the least of your worries now. Pop quiz, question 2, going for 20 points. Who do you call when you can't? When the very thing that connects you to the outside world is hung up on a wall next to a door that you can't approach, maybe tucked under a desk, which is hopefully not in front of a barricade to increase your chance of survival. When your voice is locked up tighter than a door or window, which is the very difference between life or death that may or may not hold, who gets to hear your last breath? No distractions, no screens. The real distraction is the scream stuck in your throat, phones pinging with no one to answer as blood is painted on the hallways. You're shushed again, this time for not talking too loud, but for the quiet whimpering you make as you mumble another prayer to keep your little sibling in room 203 alive. If anything, let them live and take your life instead, or is it a fight for your own survival? Thrusted into a situation you've ever only heard of on the news. Pop quiz. Question 3, going for 15 points. How do you explain this to your mother? The policy says your last breath may never make its way home, that it could die in a room full of people and still be alone. Your dad will call you. A deathly silence on the other line as rings erupt into the air with a high-pitched cry so similar to the ones you just heard outside of the hallway. Pop quiz. Question 4, heading towards 10 points. What is the sound of hope? Is it the distant wail of sirens? The soft shuffle of step? Maybe it's the quick click of a lock that hold or the breath you didn't think you'd get to take again. Or maybe it's just silence. Pop quiz, final bonus question. 5 points are now up for grabs. When they count their survivors, will the bodies that litter educational floors be more than a statistic they scroll past? Or will the ones to live go on, still carrying the weight of the silence after the noise stops? Graduate, remember forever. Will the rest of America do the same? America bites more than she kisses, with blood behind her teeth and screams under her tongue. Liberty's a planet, justice an ocean floor. Our arms are tired of carrying out hope, born again, safe to suffer. We've been through the same drills over and over, except the thing that worries America the most is a scream and not the screams. Pop quiz, 0 points. This was just an extra. It doesn't cost anything. The same way that the precious lives of students across the U.S. can't compare the crucial case of screens distracting us from class. Pop quiz, except nobody studied for this. Thank you.
That was incredible. These have all been incredible. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our closers for today. These two are not only incredible students and human beings, but they are seniors at Exeter High School. They are the reason why we love teaching, getting to work with incredible humans like everyone out here. Please join me in welcoming Shayla Gherkin and Beatrice Mella to do History on Repeat.
Let me say this clearly, the past is present. 1776, she stitched flags but couldn't vote under its stars.
Now she runs for president, but they still question if she's gone too far.
1920, women's votes won, respect still pending.
100 years later, still explaining, still defending.
Don't call it the past when we're living it presently.
A woman's no ignored in whispered fear.
Now it's shouted in courtrooms, falling on deaf ears.
1973, her body, her choice.
2022, Donald Trump boasts, I was able to kill Roe v. Wade, dictating our voice.
She burned bras to break free, but the flames weren't enough.
Freedom isn't fabric, it's being treated like you're tough. Toughness that is forced on us. 2012, Sandy Hook proved Americans believe guns are more important than kids being taught.
I'm less stressed about going to college than being shot.
Another classroom, another crime scene. The Second Amendment is outdated. 488 mass shootings in 2024.
How many more till guns are regulated?
History's echoes sound a lot like today. We mark our biases in subtle tones, attacking those whose ideas don't reflect our own.
Marginalized communities work tirelessly to get here. In return, they're being ripped from their loved ones, all for the betterment of our nation in fear. The American dream is no longer what it seems. It's an adverse nightmare tearing the nation apart by no moral means.
How can someone risk it all, fleeing to a place whose progression is in reverse, hitting backspace? No longer can we be proudly American when America retraces its steps in history. If history repeats, then so will we. Louder, stronger, unapologetically.
Terrific, and having been a history teacher, I like the way this ended. A lot of history there. And actually, we do have a few minutes, and I would like to go back to the students. We heard all sorts of different topics in those poems about childhood, about parenting, and so on. And I'm just curious, and just raise your hand and I'll hand the mic to you. I'm interested in where that came from. What was the event? Or what inspired you to get the idea to write the poem that you wrote? Where did it come
from? When we first started the poetry unit, I was very desperate because I had no idea what I was doing, and Xavier reached out to me and asked if we wanted to do the poem together, which I quickly accepted because I knew that I was going to fail if I didn't have him by my side. So at least if I was going to fail, he was coming down with me. But as we were discussing what we should make it about, we decided that it should be probably something that we have in common. First is start off as sports because we both do track and whatever, but we knew that didn't really hold any sentimental value, and it didn't really make sense to do something that was so like insignificant. So after probably like 20 minutes of the conversation, we were talking about how we're first generation Americans inside our family and how that makes us feel as we feel disconnected from our culture. So we ended up talking about, you know, how, especially because we're both Spanish or come from Spanish countries, so the poem just ended up being about how we feel disconnected from our cultures. So I guess that was better than sports, and especially me failing the class. Wanna do it?
When I got the idea for this, I actually heard a song, because it was a really cool concept. It was like a song about like this guy not meeting their son's like mother yet, and I thought that was a cool concept. And through like other poems, like the Sarah Kay poem, I got the idea for it. So.
Anybody else? By the way, if Gabe doesn't have a career in poetry, comedy may be something he can work with. Yes.
My poem was kind of a mix of just growing up and kind of discovering what the world thought being a girl and being a woman was. Also, I read this book earlier in the fall called Moxie, and it blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, there's like a lot of people. It's based in a high school, and it's a teenage girl who like learns about how she can fight for women's rights and just fighting stereotypes. And I was like, okay, like I love this book so much. And when I was writing it, I was so nervous about saying it in front of my class. So I was like, oh, these boys are gonna say it's so stupid, like I'm so dramatic. But then I was like, okay, I need it to be even more confronting than I thought I should have put it. So it was really just born from growing up and being told what I was supposed to do and how I was supposed to act, and then discovering that there was a fight going on and that I could be a part of it too.
My idea for my poem actually came from a prompt in poetry team, and at first it started off with like policies that we didn't agree with in our school. And gun violence in America is a very, very serious topic. And I was thinking about not having phones in classrooms anymore and how that wasn't allowed. And at first it started off as a small idea, but it grew into something bigger, and I kind of took that and incorporated it into my slam poem.
Any questions from the audience that you'd like to pose to these young poets? I have another question, by the way, so if we don't get something from the audience, but I want to give you a chance. No, okay. Actually, what I'd like to know is, you've been through this now. You've written a poem, you've performed a poem, and I wonder what you have in mind for your next poem. Do you have a concept that you might come up with? It's been interesting. We have one was inspired by a common experience and background, one from a song, one from a book that was read. What about the next poem? Have you got any ideas about where you're going to go?
While we were driving here, I was already thinking about one. I was like thinking about like how I feel like I've matured so quickly than a lot of people that I know. And I thought, a locked toy box, like I feel like I could do something with that, and how like I've grown up so much faster than a lot of like classmates that I've had. And I was already thinking about doing something like that. I'm always thinking about different prompts. My notes app is just filled to the brim. It's probably where all my data goes. But yeah, I just always write them down. That's my next thing to think about.
Anybody else got something in mind? Well, let's give them all a round of applause. Again, if the poems went by too quickly, they're posted over there if you'd like to read them, and come up and have a chat with these wonderful poets if you'd like. Thanks for coming.